These days, the news is filled with crusty old politicians launching into the desperate and often humiliating horse race to become POTUS. The President of the United States is the Commander-in-Chief of the greatest military force in world history with the power to wipe countries off the map. He can almost make legislation on his own with executive orders too. To be president is to be the most powerful man in world history, and if you stumble and fall on your quest to claim the throne, at least you can make a handsome profit selling a memoir. This is not really what the framers had in mind. They feared elected monarchy just the same as inherited monarchy. So what if America had a different system? What if we had a prime minister, kind of like Canada or Britain? We probably have more than two parties than two, like those countries, right? Well, this is what, why, how, and that's what the video is about. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and my Patreon. Okay, so the inspiration for this video is all these articles out there which pose the question of if America had more than two political parties. Generally, the articles suggest a few additional ones. A nationalist party for Trump, a progressive party for Bernie Sanders, that kind of stuff. In real life, the Dems and Republicans in the House are divided by a few major caucuses. The Democrats, for example, have the Blue Dog Caucus, which is moderate, the Progressive Caucus, which is progressive, and the New Democrat Coalition in the middle, with Republicans having the Moderate Governance Group, the Right-Wing Freedom Caucus, and the Study Committee between them. Here's a map of House seats if those caucuses were made into new political parties. The red is the Progressive Party, the orange is the slightly more moderate Democratic Party, then there's the smaller New Democrats, who are the centrist Bill Clintonites of the bunch. On the right, we first have the purple-colored Republican Party, which is center-right, and the last vestiges of the Northeastern Rockefeller Republicanism. Then there's the Blue Conservative Party, which is Reagan's baby, and beyond them is the Green Liberty Party, which stretches between libertarianism and Trumpism. Theoretically, I could add additional parties for the Mormons in Utah or for African Americans. Canada has a Quebec party, and Britain has a Scotland party for comparison, but those minority groups in America aren't really monolithic or secessionist, so they might just vote for the other parties really. In the House, these parties would probably form broad alliances based off their place on the political axis. Prime Ministers Obama and Biden would probably be Democrats trying to balance between the demands of the progressives and the New Democrats, while Trump would be a Liberty Party guy and George W. Bush a Conservative Party guy. Not that those politicians would necessarily get elected. I'd imagine you need to be a real good political dealmaker, a genius insider, to become the Prime Minister of America, so less Obama and Bush and more Nancy Pelosi and John Boehner. Ugh. This is an interesting little thought experiment, but let's go deeper. How could this actually come about? How could history have gone differently so that America had so many parties and a prime minister too? To be honest, America's only had two major political parties basically from the start. First, there were the Federalists and the Democrats, then the Whigs and the Democrats, then the Republicans and the Democrats. There have been a few third parties, but they never really stick around for too long or make a major mark unless they replace one of the big parties. This is for a variety of reasons, including our system of government, our political culture, and the fact that the two parties are so influential in and of themselves. Maybe I'll make a video about that. But it's not impossible for America to have major third parties. Countries that have presidents do have third parties like France and Brazil, while plenty of countries with our system of voting, where the number one guy wins, have multiple parties. So if you want to get a multi-party America, you just need to rewind back to the start of the country and change around some stuff with our political culture and our system. Let's look back to Philadelphia in 1787. The United States have been, that's plural, have, since the country's not truly unified yet, independent for a little while now, and the Articles of Confederation which bond them into a country have proved insufficient for the task of governing a nascent union. So the leaders of the country gather together in Philadelphia to draft a new constitution. As they gradually decide to create a Senate where states had equal votes and a House where states got votes based off population, the convention also tackled the question of the chief executive of the country. A key issue was how exactly the man would be chosen. Some wanted the executive to be directly elected by the people, others wanted him to be chosen by Congress, and others wanted a state-appointed electoral college to choose him. The two best developed early plans proposed that Congress elect the executive, kind of like a prime minister. Only two states really opposed Congress doing that, Pennsylvania and Maryland, but eventually they convinced the others, and now we're stuck with the Electoral College to this day. So you kind of have Pennsylvania and Maryland to thank for George Bush and Donald Trump in a roundabout way. How about term of office? Well, the New Jersey plan, which was preferred by smaller states, proposed 1 year, while the Virginia plan, preferred by the big states, proposed 7 years. Ultimately, 4 years was selected as a compromise after basically every suggestion possible was proposed. If you read a book on the Constitutional Convention, you'll see that these guys basically just threw anything at the wall to see what stuck. It's worth pointing out that Rhode Island didn't even bother sending delegates to Philadelphia, while New Hampshire's delegates got there late because the state didn't want to pay for their trip. If either of those states sent their guys south in time, then maybe the New Jersey plan would have gotten the support it needed to get enacted. Let's say that they did, and the new US Constitution has it so that the chief executive is elected by Congress, kind of like a prime minister. Now, annual executive elections were probably not going to fly no matter what, since the convention didn't want the executive to be too subservient to Congress. As a compromise, maybe the guy can serve for however long the majority of Congress wants, staying in office until a vote of no confidence is passed or someone else gets the majority, like how Canada and Britain do it today. How about his title? Well, Prime Minister has too many subservient implications at that time, so the convention probably goes with President. This makes more sense than real life, since a president in those days was someone who presided over a legislature or a council. But while the president has the same title in this timeline, he's fundamentally a prime minister. Since the founders wanted balance between the House and the Senate, the president can be elected by joint sessions of Congress, with each congressman getting a vote, senator and representative. That's a lot simpler than what the Constitution actually says. We can keep the vice president around. Now, his role in the Senate is a lot more important, since his job depends on making sure senators vote for him and his boss. Now, today we're used to prime ministers being paired with kings, but there are plenty of parliamentary republics out there, including India and Germany. This change would add America to the list, since the president gets elected by the legislature and is functionally a prime minister with extra juice, but there's no king of America. Anyways, what's next? Well, over the course of American history, Congress would be the dominant branch of government, not the presidency. We can therefore track the rise and fall of political parties by congressional and not by presidential elections, which leads to big changes. The first president is probably still George Washington, but I bet he'd step down from office quicker if Congress could boss him around so much. His feud with Congress leaves a bit of a sour taste in Congress's mouth. As a result, the capital is just named Columbia, not Washington, D.C. Following Washington to the presidency is Frederick Muhlenberg of PA, a Democratic Republican who was, in real life, the first Speaker of the House. Fast forwarding, the Democratic Republican Party still dominates America for the first third of the 1800s, purchasing Louisiana and adding a whole bunch of new states. The difference would be that the popular presidents might not step down from office. So President Monroe serves in office for 15 years, deeply forging the position of the president as one of importance. He is viewed as a much more consequential president than Washington. But presidents can't force Congress to do their bidding. Andrew Jackson, for example, gets voted out of office over his party's internal disagreements on the national bank and whether states can nullify federal laws, for example. Presidents have to be a lot less go-it-alone cowboys and more inside wheeler-dealers in this system of government. Since congressional deal-making is key to winning the presidency, we'll probably see the legendary Henry Clay get into office. He tried in real life like a dozen times, making him look like a scarecrow. President Clay is the head of the ascendant pro-industry National Party and holds onto power against the pro-agriculture Democratic Party and the anti-immigrant Patriot Party, which is America's first major third party. But Clay eventually loses power in 1852 to the Democrats, led by the boisterous Howell Cobb. While Clay lays dying from old age, the new Democratic majority accepts the annexation of Texas, then happily plunges into war against Mexico. The war with Mexico is controversial, but the US annexes the northern half of the country anyways. More turf than real life, thanks to a wave of nationalism. The new territories, stretching from sea to shining sea, heighten the debate over slavery. How about the Civil War? Well, in this case, I just don't think Congress is going to vote into office somebody like Abraham Lincoln. Plus, the South could block the admittance of new anti-slavery states so that they hold onto their power for longer. That means no 1860 crisis and no Civil War. So if America was more like Canada, we maybe wouldn't have had a Civil War in the 1860s. But that also means that slavery would last longer in this country. As the US grows more and more industrialized in the second half of the 1800s, you would start to see factories manned by corporate-owned slaves in southern cities like Atlanta and New Orleans. Now, opposition to slavery wouldn't go away. The North would be enraged about the continuing practice in the South, with abolitionism growing to be a major political force. An abolitionist even assassinates President Howell Cobb in 1861. More electoral-minded abolitionists forged the new Freedom Party. They win office in 1872, but the Democrats filibuster away their plans. Instead, changing social norms and international boycotts of Southern goods drive the Southern states to formally abolish slavery by 1887. But like in real life, it just takes different forms, from prison labor to debt peonage. So no civil war, but the blood lost elsewhere balances it out. For the next 30 years, the moderate Liberal Party, founded by Andrew Johnson, and the Democratic Party swap off power. They're both pretty corrupt, buying and selling offices. With no civil war, the US would probably be a lot more racist than real life, so the presidents of this era participate in a colonization of Africa, formally taking control of Liberia and even parts of the Congo. Impoverished African Americans are then sent there by the government, while corporate conglomerates control the country. The US also sweeps up the fraying Spanish Empire, taking control of Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines as territories. Back in the US, President Joseph Cannon of the Liberal Party dominates the House until economic downturn brings to power a new political party, the Progressives. Launched by Teddy Roosevelt of New York, the Progressives campaign on helping out the middle class and workers. In 1910, the Progressive Party wins enough seats in the House to form a coalition government with other reformers, electing Teddy president. As chief, President Roosevelt passes a series of amendments which the public supports, like the direct election of U.S. senators. Notably, the Progressives choose their leaders through large primary ballots. Other parties follow suit, making the system overall more democratic. The Progressives aren't all peachy though. They also further cut down on immigration, promote eugenics, and ban alcohol over the next few years. It's in this period that America solidifies as a multi-party system, with the conservative Democratic Party and the moderate Liberal Party also holding chunks of Congress. This is actually pretty run-of-the-mill in real life in other countries, which have a few major parties competing for power. In this alternative USA, a few different reasons are behind the creation of a multi-party system, from the greater leverage smaller parties have in a parliamentary government to a different political culture as a whole. Anyways, when war erupts in Europe in 1915, President Roosevelt attempts to get the US to intervene, but fails thanks to congressional opposition and is then shot dead by an anarchist. The US stays out of the war. As a result, Germany wins, sweeping up Belgium and forcing France to pay huge indemnity sums. In any case, the 1920s are a time of economic prosperity in America, but this wealth turns sour in 1931 with a major economic collapse. The Progressive Party reclaims power in the 1932 elections, with Franklin D. Roosevelt leading the charge. Once in power, Roosevelt passes major progressive policies to address the crisis. While some of these are slowed down by the courts, and eventually his caucus calms down a bit, he makes a serious mark before being blown up by a radical anarchist in 1940. On Roosevelt's deathbed, Japan launches an attack against America in the Pacific, dragging the country into the Second World War. Congress selects a new president, Henry Wallace, who joins the country into an alliance of Britain, France, and Russia against Germany and Japan. While the US beats Japan, Germany takes control of Europe and beats Russia. Even though the US and Germany make peace in 1946, a shadow war continues between the two superpowers. President Wallace and the Progressives are voted out of office in 1948, but the Liberal Party only holds on to power briefly before Progressives take it back in 1950. They elect a new leader, John McCormick of Massachusetts. McCormick and his Progressives make major changes as part of a wave of backlash against Germany's conservatism. Civil rights bills are passed to ensure the vote for African Americans, and the US exits its colonial possessions and pressures others to do the same. It also sponsors pro-democratic movements in Europe and across the world. However, it also devotes the US to maintaining law and order, whatever that means, in Latin America and Africa. US soldiers become pulled into a whirlpool of conflict in Iran after that country falls into civil war too. McCormick is a very crafty politician. He keeps hold of the presidency for longer than anyone else. He leads the US between the years 1951 and 1971, only losing the office when he's shot to death by a crazy guy. That's 20 years in power. McCormick keeps control due to the popularity of his policies, close alliance with the major news networks, and the gerrymandering of congressional districts. After his death, the Progressives select a series of guys, including the boisterous LBJ, the short Carl Albert, and finally Tip O'Neill of Massachusetts. As president, Tip successfully gets a Canadian-style healthcare system in place and negotiates a peace deal between Britain and seceding Ireland. Like McCormick, Tip successfully balances factions in his own party and is good enough at campaigning to keep the Liberal Party out of power. He dies in 1995 of cardiac arrest. At that point, the progressives have dominated US politics since the Great Depression, more or less. They'd brought major changes to the country, but also created an atmosphere of stagnation and deep-seated political corruption. With that being the case, the 1996 elections bring to power a new rising star, Newt Gingrich, the standard-bearer of the skyrocketing Conservative Party. Once he gets the presidency, Gingrich slashes government spending, programs, and corporate regulations. Business booms for a few years until the economy's bubble pops in 2000. The progressives get back power under the leadership of Bill Bradley, but they quickly lose again to the moderate New Liberal Party led by Nancy Pelosi, the first woman president. Pelosi clings onto power until the conservatives reclaim the majority in 2006. President Gingrich is soon confronted by a major political crisis, the collapse of the German Empire in Europe. In Poland, ethnic tensions erupt into genocide. The US intervenes in the conflict, bombing radical factions. The new German Republic soon afterward collapses into civil war, pulling the US into prolonged fighting with the risk of nuclear warfare. Backlash to the war drives Gingrich out of power in 2017 and brings back the New Liberal Party in a coalition government with the progressives. Notably, the rising star Barack Obama is Pelosi's VP. President Pelosi's cabinet struggles to form a peace plan for Europe, but the factions manage to cobble together a fragile new system on the basis of national sovereignty. Economic downturn and the spread of a new highly contagious disease, allegedly from German bioweapon facilities if you trust social media websites, threatens to disrupt Pelosi's presidency. In 2024, American voters head to the ballot box once again. The three largest parties are the Conservatives, who are capitalist and right-wing, the New Liberal Party, which is capitalist and centrist, and the Progressive Union, which is an alliance of all the little left-wing parties of America, including the Green Party, the Workers' Union parties, and of course the Socialist Party of America. Meanwhile, there's the Democratic Party, which still gets some support among Southern conservatives, and the Freedom Party, which is back and is basically the Libertarian Party on steroids. Then also there's a slew of various parties which represent different interest groups. There's the Democracia Cristiana Party for Latin Americans, for example, since the US has more Hispanic people in this timeline. Then there's some zany ones, like the Plead the First Party for Mormon rights, Navajo State for the partition of Arizona, and the neo-fascist National Triumph Party, and even some parties that flirt with Californian or Texan secessionism. Who would you vote for? Who's gonna win in 2024? Comment below. And if you like this video, subscribe and support my channel at patreon.com/whatwhyhow. For $1 a month, you can get your name in the credits like the esteemed user SEQ, Sadie Bubs, and Ethan W. Monster.